live. But let's talk about the actual book. When I heard about the premise of it, I thought, this is great. I need it now. Now! A group of Secret Service agents, more or less, are trying to protect some people from superheroes' collateral damages. The first scene lets us know why this is needed, with some of these so-called superheroes need to be put in their place or killed. Now, as I was saying, people who are watching, hi everybody watching live on patreon.com/kindafunny. The Kind of Funny podcast will be joining you in roughly 30 minutes or so. We're in the middle of finishing up Greg's comic book club, so I thought, why not let you join us halfway through and not understand what's going on? Maybe you've never watched one before. This is a good way to get you wet, even though it doesn't make any sense because usually there's a co-host and this time there's not, which I explained at the front, but I digress. Don't worry about it. Right now we're in required reading The Boys Volume 1. It's a graphic book. Back to Jericho's review. The first scene lets us know why this is needed, with some of these so-called heroes need to be put in their place or killed. The dialogue and the situations you stumble upon are so funny that I have to audibly laugh, even put the book to the side for a second to think about what I just saw. I love the humor. It speaks right to me. Example, quote, you get on your knees and you put it in your mouth and you suck the goddamn thing. The sentence is funny by itself, but the situation that's happening even makes it even funnier. It makes it distressing. You know what I mean? Now, granted, it's the fact of what these people are doing. And what I liked about it was the play of like Starlight being like, basically about their Superman, right? When other people come in the room, of her being like, I think he has mind control. Someone's doing all this horrible stuff to him, blah, 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 blah. And then the other guys go the exact same way. And she's like, oh no, you're all just scumbag, horrible fucking people. I am definitely in for the ride. I want to see how Huey is doing and if he can deal with not only his new superpowers, but also the whole situation he put himself into, or rather got forced into. Also, pretty excited to see this be adapted as a live action show on Amazon Prime. Cool beans. That's the thing for me is like, again, having forgotten how graphic, both in terms of sexuality, in terms of brutality, in terms of just being a bunch of assholes, The Boys is. I am very interested to see what this Amazon Prime show is going to be and how much they lean into that, how much they update that, how clever they get with their language. It's out there. Mo writes in, I really like The Boys. I've read it before, but going back was fun to see how it started before it gets even darker as the series go on. For me, the best thing about the book is the art by Derek Robertson, who I haven't mentioned yet. I love how he draws seemingly classic superhero stuff, but adds a level of grime to everything. Really fits with the overall feel of the book, and for anybody who keeps reading, his pages of bloody horror in later issues really stand out. Adam Matthew Inc. writes in, I've heard of The Boys before, but Googling the comic always led me to black and white sketchy ink drawings that made me disinterested. Seeing what Prime is doing for the series piqued my level of interest. I'm glad Greg's Comic Book Club added The Boys as required reading because Volume 1 was thoroughly enjoyable. As a hero comic fan, it was great to see Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson create such a uniquely dark, raunchy, and gruesome version of superhero comics. The idea takes the kick-ass world and adds actual superheroes. While I enjoyed Volume 1, I am not sure I would continue with the series. The initial surprise and novelty wore off with disinteresting panels and of the same people talking. Robertson's artwork isn't enough to keep me going. So there you go, Mo and Adam not agreeing on the artwork side of it. And for me, it was an interesting one too of like, I think we said on last Comic Book Club, extra credit would be to read all of it, right? Because it's all out now. You can read all The Boys. It's all on the Comixology Unlimited. Again, we're not sponsored yet by them. And so why not? But like reading it last night, it was... And I hate to say it, but I think it's, as I said in the beginning, it's a comic from a different time where I don't think people would write this way, do this thing, do it the exact same way. And maybe I'm giving people too much credit, but the whole thing reads as juvenile. And I can see where it's going to be a good series on Amazon Prime, I think. But some of the stuff in there is shock for shock, right? And I understand that they're trying to establish, hey, they want to be as night and day from DC or Marvel as they can be, right? Hey, this is a world where all the heroes people think are heroes are actually fucked up deviants. And so I get that. And so I get that they need to push the envelope. They need to be more violent. They need to be horrible to Starlight. They need to have, I mean, again, you know, I always sit there with one of the reasons I love Superman is that he has all this power that he could rule the entire planet if he wants to, but instead he chooses to do good. It's a weird one. This is the opposite of that, of like, well, what if he didn't? And not even what if he went evil, like Incorruptible or Irredeemable, or even Brightburn, which is in theaters and a fantastic movie. This one is very much the opposite of just like, what if they just use this power to be publicly facing great people and privately be sexual moral deviants that are horrible, horrible people? It's interesting, but even then, I just don't feel like there's nuance to it, at least Volume 1. Again, I haven't read all the way through. Perhaps it goes. Katie Gallagher wrote in, of course, Katie, the one who said I should play Moonlighter. Thank you very much. Since I'm right in the middle of Preacher, I was worried the boys would be too similar, but as soon as Robin's arms got ripped off, I was in. I really like stories that show superheroes in a different light. But despite the interesting premise, it feels like there's such a gratuitous amount of sex, violence, and swearing that after a while it loses its impact. I'm still reading, but I can't help but feel hopeful that the TV show is going to have a better balance between cool, gritty story and not having some sort of fuck, parentheses, every sense of the word, every other panel. That's a great way to put it, actually. That's a great way to put it, Katie. Colton M. Davis says, can we start with how cool it is to see a story intro by Simon Pegg? Quote, at first you had my curiosity, but now you have my attention. Seems awfully apt with this. Yeah, the story, of course, if you haven't read this yet or you're just joining me for the Comic Book Club, we're talking about The Boys, Volume 1. It starts with a letter from Simon Pegg that is totally, hey, like this guy, you know, when they were making The Boys, he used my likeness without telling me, and it's because he liked me in Spaced, and of course no one thought I was going to be anything, so why would that be a big deal? But then Shaun of the Dead happened, he became a movie star, this book got popular, and then everybody's like, wait, that looks like Simon Pegg, and rather than lie, they're just like, yeah, it's Simon Pegg, and Simon Pegg was like, that's fucking awesome, I love being in a comic book, which is a cool story, but a huge risk for getting fucking sued and getting into a lot of trouble. To Colton's review here. I thought the book was quite good overall, although I do not agree with Kayla and the other commenters. Although I do agree with Kayla and the other commenters that some specific scenes and language are a bit off-putting. I get this was made several years back, but some parts still left a bad taste. I feel like making a TV show in today's environment will only help by cutting back on some of the off-putting language. Plus, Carl Urban could do no wrong. I did enjoy the book overall, and I will read later volumes as time permits. Yeah, like I said, a product of its time, the book, and now 19 years later, this show. It's going to be fascinating to see what actually makes it and what doesn't make it, because there's no way Amazon Prime is going to be this graphic and gross, and even the violence I think you'll get away with. The language usage, no. Having the dog, you know, rape another dog. I don't think that's going to be one of Butcher's things that he can make his dog do on command on the show. But we'll see. Who knows? Amazon Prime, end of July. Arvel said, I actually read the first volume twice now in the last couple of weeks, partly because I have seen the first episode of the 8-episode first season at my local Comic-Con. At first, I was very surprised that the main character of The Boys was modeled after Simon Pegg. The omnibus that I was reading even had an introduction written by Pegg. We've talked about this. The premise of the book reminded me strongly of The Tick in the sense that the world where superheroes have been established for quite some time. I like the meta references to other superhero groups like the Avengers or the Justice League that have been rotating the roster, have a rotating roster when it comes to full-on admission process to be coming here. Overall, it's a great premise, and I think I'll stick with the series as it progresses. And then finally, CJ Sizemore writes in and says, I read The Boys Volume 1 a couple months back. I was hoping to get hooked and love the series. Unfortunately, I just couldn't get that into it. There was a ton of very graphic panels. I'm not normally one to complain about such things, but I just felt weird reading it. I don't really feel good about any of the characters. Not my favorite comic, but I hope one day I will see the light. I don't know if there's anything to see the light about. The thing about not liking the characters, I like Huey, right? And I like, what's her name? Starlight is what I said earlier. I like her, and I like that in Volume 1, them sitting on that bench talking to each other in Central Park, right? Like, I like them, and I like their respective journeys through this. And again, I kind of want to see it because I assume there's comeuppance on both sides of the equation for these people that are horrible assholes. But I'm with you, right? That it's like, I'm not the one to complain about graphic panels or language or anything like that, but the fact that it is so, we're in your face to be in your face. We're the superhero book that's not published by one of the big two. I'm not even including Image because I don't think back there they were a big three. Big two, like this is what we're not your grandpappy's comic. Like, it feels like they're beating you over the head with it. And that's where I think the show could shine, of taking that premise and making it more nuanced, because I just feel like there's no nuance in the book, right? And that works to an extent, like, you know, we talked about earlier with with Butcher fucking the CIA director on her table. Like, okay, I get that, but the way they throw that switch isn't in the way it's drawn. It's not like you're doing that for shock, and that reads as shock, which isn't a bad thing necessarily, but it isn't a thing that makes me excited to go home tonight, and I'm not going to play video games. I'm going to read the next 2 volumes. Like, I want to know, but then I could also probably just read a Wikipedia summary and be okay. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where we pick the next required reading. I guess I get to pick for April, which is exciting, because I didn't plan it as usual, and so I'm just going to go to Comixology and see what they got here. I'm trying to think, and I'm looking through my book over here too, my iPad, see what I haven't read that we need to read together. Oh, you know what? That's going to be a lot for you, not for me. Hold on one second. When does the final Paper Girls come out? Paper Girls number 30. When is that out? All right, it's a double-sized final issue. I'm on Image Comics right now. Coming out July 31st. Well, that's fine. Here's what I say we do. It'll be the biggest required reading we've ever done. I say we read all of Paper Girls. 30 issues.
What?
30 issues.
You're crazy.
Or, I mean, if you want to just jump in at the end. No, I know. I'm ignoring you. If you want to just jump in the end and read number 30, that's fine too. July 31st, that's out. But I say required reading is all of Paper Girls because I want to get caught up and I want to finish that off. And I'm very excited for it. So there you go. Paper Girls. All of it. There you go. Paper Girls, all of it. All thing. You can just read number 30 if you want. I don't think you'll get the whole thing. But if you don't want to jump into it, I understand. Let's get into your big questions, of course, when I put up the participation thread over on patreon.com/kindafunny, or if you're a gold member, patreon.com/kindafunnygames. You can chime in with your reviews of the comics we're doing, what I should be reading, what your favorite shop is, and then questions like CJ Sizemore did. Why are there random sex scenes in comics? And this is, of course, piggybacking right off of The Boys. Seems like almost all of the required readings we've had in the past 3 to 4 months have all had weird sex panels in them, like Tokyo Ghost and the weird naked mayor, Low with the weird orgy sex scene in the government offices, and, orgy scene with the weird with the government officials, period. There were a lot in this month, especially in the dog sex panel. It just seems really out of place and just weird. Well, I think everything's using it to a different level here, CJ. So for Boys, as we've talked about, I think it's shock value, and I definitely think it is. This isn't your grandfather's comic, which is what I think they, originally DC was motivating them to do when they started The Boys. Was we want something different, we want something headline grabbing, and then it went too far and they dumped it, and then Dynamite got it. I think that's there for shock value. That's there to be, we're an adult comic. You're an adult person. You're a teenager. You know what I mean? But let's look at this. From there on out, I think Low coming up, you bring up the orgy with the government officials. I dug that, right? Because I do think that's the human condition. Because you remember in Low, it was, hey, everything's fucking over. We're all about to die. So of course, I think the government would just fuck off and like they would all fuck each other and do that. And Low's also the one, right, that starts with the mom and dad in a very intimate moment. But like, you say random sex scenes, right? I think there's a difference between graphic sex scenes and random sex scenes or sex scenes in general, right? The Low opening of the mom and dad having sex, to me, wasn't erotic. It was meant to be, these two people are a couple. They have a great relationship. Their lives are really, really great. And let's see how badly that goes. Whereas the same thing with the government officials, right? Where it's like, again, I didn't think it was erotic as much as it was like you open the door and that's not what you're expecting if you walked into City Hall. And then the justification of it. Whereas The Boys is, to Jericho's chagrin in the airport, you turn the page, you're like, whoa, fuck, I did not expect to see that, right? I think sex and nudity is used in a variety of different ways in comic books. I think usually it's meant to establish a relationship, right? When I think of sex in comics, I mean, now I'm thinking of Sunstone, one of the things I talked about here, which is a comic all about like BDSM, but it isn't, because it's not about graphic porn. It's about these two women like learning to be sub and dom and falling in love and knowing they're going to get married, and the art there not being like graphic in turn, other than them being nude or in various states of bondage, but not in the actual act of sex. And the same thing when I think of Saga, right? Saga having that relationship and showing Mako, and I'm blanking on names, but the husband and wife in Saga, showing them in various states. And granted, theirs is a bit more graphic. I mean, they're in various states of sex. But I even that was never erotic as much as it was like, again, this is a real human relationship. This is an intimate relationship. This is how these two people play together. It's trying to capture human condition, I think. And sometimes it's done really well, and then other times it's not done well, and it is, why is that happening and how? And I think most of the time it's a swing and a miss. It's similar to sex in video games, right? Where I think it's often done poorly, and then you'll have Mass Effect where they show cutaways or the side of a butt cheek, and you're like, I get it. And that seems like a real intimate moment. That seems like a payoff for the characters I have. And so it's all about, I guess, how it's done and then your own personal taste on the issue. Arvel says, as I've read Spider-Man, The Clone Conspiracy, and Spider-Geddon, both storylines are event comics that rely on reading lots of related comic books of characters that are in the event, like Spider-Gwen, Superior Spider-Man, or Scarlet Spider. Unfortunately, the story is spread all over the comic books. So if you were just to only read the main storyline comics, you would miss a heavy story beats and would be puzzled by things that you haven't read before. What are your thoughts and experiences for that? Do you like crossover events in comics, or do you wait until there's a big omnibus version available that contains all the related comics? Would you rather prefer something like an editor's cut that would rearrange the story elements into a single comic book, or would you rather jump from story to story on your own? For the most part, I hate event books. I think that they're a product of a bygone age. Now, granted, they keep happening, so clearly there's still financial value to them to Marvel and DC, but I think it's a tale of two Gregs to an extent, where growing up, fucking Final Night's happening, I'm all in. Now, granted, I was already picking up most of those books, right? Death of Superman, Death and Return of Superman. I got to start picking up Supergirl. I got to do this. I got to look at the Justice League. Cool. That's an event that I'm in for. But like now, like, you know, I don't even know, honestly, and I know this sucks because I'm Greg and I host this comic show with you, I guess. I'm so far behind that I don't even know what Leviathan Rising is for DC Comics, and I have so many books in here that have the Leviathan Rising thing or the tease at the end, and I'm just like, I don't know why are we getting in the way of it? That's what I feel events do. Events get in the way of what is happening with the comics you love. And I always go back to Batgirl, right? When Batgirl of Burnside was happening after Babs and crew had taken over at issue 35, right? We had this great, bright, sunny Barbara Gordon Batgirl world that was happening in Burnside that wasn't the darker, gritty Batman world, and it was awesome, and it worked. And her outfit that wasn't like more fashionable and not like a Batman outfit worked really well. And then it was Death of the Family crossover, where suddenly Gotham's like, you know, infected by the Joker stuff. Joker's got them all, and it was just like seeing that Batgirl of Burnside run around in that Gotham and fight that Joker, and it was just like, well, this is a weird juxtaposition. They just stopped the story that I actually liked. The reason I was actually on this book, you're inserting all this other stuff into that I don't care about. And it's so rare that I'll ever have the desire or time to go collect everything else to get to the part of it, right? Like when I'm trying to get more into Marvel, as always, when I look over there and everything they're doing with War of the Realms, right? And it was just like, oof, like that's a lot of books. We talked about it on the show, I think last month or a couple months ago, where it's just like, I'm sure a lot of that's cool. There's no way I would read it at all. I like my stories to be contained, and then we're into the same argument I've had all the time with you guys about continuity and how they should just blow it up and just let everybody make their own stories unless they want to tell a story in that world. But I digress. That's something you've heard on Comic Book Club before. I like to say with you, what have you been reading? What should we be reading? What's everybody else need to know about? You guys have written in with a whole bunch of stuff. Brandon Jackson Short says, Naomi. A lot of people have been loving this book, and while it's kept my interest, I feel like it's been kind of slow. That being said, the most recent issue finally revealed Naomi's secret origin, and it's got me really excited to see where Bendis takes her. It also doesn't hurt that the art is amazing. Yeah, I'm still way behind on Naomi. Like I said, issue 1 grabbed me, and then I didn't like the whole tease at the end that she's going to have powers. Obviously, I'm still downloading, so I see the covers with her in suits, so it's like, she does have it. So apparently you were liking it. Brandon chimes in too. War of the Realms Strike Force, the Land of Giants. I didn't want to end on a sour note, so let's talk about this. I moved his stuff around. It was brilliant. I've gotten kind of burned out on War of the Realms stuff, but once again, I had to give Tom Taylor a shot. He delivered. The story was mostly just expanding on something from one of the main event books, but Taylor gave the team great character interactions and once again proved why he's my favorite Spider-Man writer. Other writers tend to make Spidey a bit incompetent and annoying, but Taylor finds a way to show him as adept, funny, and full of heart. This book has one of the funniest moments I've ever seen in the comic and one of the saddest. And they were both because of a horse. What other writer can do that? Tom Taylor can do basically no wrong. I'm way behind on Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man 2 that he's doing, which from what I did read, I really, really dug. Kayla jumps in. She says Murder Falcon 6 through 8. Murder Falcon for sure has been my favorite comic book series of this year. Of course, it was one of the Greg's comic book club here. It wasn't nearly done though, so I'm glad to see she's continuing with it. Yes, it has metal references. Yes, it has monsters fighting, but the real story of this book is Jake's journey. Did I cry? Oh, yep, I did. Trade paperback comes out this July. Pick it up. Now that it's done, Kayla, I'll probably just go and jump in because that was the thing. Remember when we did the first couple issues, we were like, well, this is metal and it's weird, but it seems like they're building up that something's really going on behind the scenes. So I do really want to know how Jake's story ends. And then Kayla shouts out Dark Knight, a true Batman story by Paul Dini. This is an older one, but I remember reading it back in the day. She goes, my boyfriend saw this at the depot and commented he wanted to check it out since he heard the Fat Man on Batman episode with Paul Dini describing what the book is about. It's an autobiographical graphic novel about Dini, a writer on Batman the Animated Series, if you didn't know. He goes on to describe the origin story of Dini from childhood to being the household name at Warner Brothers Animation to the horrifying trauma he endured one fateful evening and the devastation afterward with losing his faith with Batman. The story captivated me right from the beginning. I couldn't put it down and read it in one night. A must read. I agree. Back in the day, I want to say we talked about this on the morning shows when Greg's Comic Book Club was something we anchored there. But this is one I had never heard a story of for Paul Dini's career. And then, seeing him wrestle with basically PTSD after being assaulted and how that plays into Batman and how it played into Batman the Animated Series is all super interesting stuff. Mo wrote in and said, X-Men Grand Design. The best thing for X-Men fans. Written and drawn by Ed Piskor. It just takes you through the entire history of X-Men and reminds you why they're the coolest team out there. Fun to read digitally, but printed versions come in oversized Marvel Treasury editions, and the work that goes into the actual production is just awe-inspiring. That sounds super interesting. I hadn't heard of X-Men Grand Design, but you made me want to pick it up, Mo. So good work. Daniel writes in and says, The Last Night on Earth, #1. Beautiful artwork and intriguing setup. Not much else to say about this book other than I'm very excited to see where Snyder and Capullo take this series. Yeah, Barrett, I know, read it, really dug it. When Benny the comic historian came over, he handed it to me and said, you have to read it. I haven't yet. Basically, though, I hear it's basically an Elseworlds that picks up as if Snyder's Batman run continued, right? But now Batman obviously has the Green Lantern and ring, so got to see what that's all about. And then Colton Davis closes out this month and says, Batman Under the Red Hood. Yes, I know this is super old, but I'm still discovering a lot about comics, and a recent Reddit post made me very excited to read this because of Black Mask. Man, I need more Black Mask in my life. He made some of the slow parts of this story worth it just with his dialogue alone. Quote, Spunky, I like that. And Red Hood's goodness gracious, I've been bamboozled is a close second. I like the movie version better, but this was a great comic through and through. Of course, Under the Red Hood, a great jam. Definitely one you should pick up. A great DC animated flick to watch too. If you have I don't want to ruin it if you haven't seen anything about it, you don't know anything about it. But I would say, pick it up. Ladies and gentlemen, here on the Comic Book Club, of course, you get to be part of it, as all these people just did. Patreon.com/kindafunny. You can go over there and be part of the show. One of the things we ask is, I love this place where you tell me what your favorite comic shop is, why it's great, where it is, why people should go see it. This time, Mo did something a little bit different and wanted to do I Love This Podcast and recommend a different podcast. And it's Cartoonist Kayfabe. A very cool podcast about the industry and the history of comics by Jim Ruggs, Street Angel, and Ed Piskor, X-Men Grand Design. Every episode, they use an issue of Wizard magazine to talk about what the comics industry was like in the 90s, and they also post really cool shows with professionals giving shoot interviews about the industry. They also have episodes where they break down classic comics like Akira and Killing Joke from the perspective of two comic pros. Also, some cool educational videos on self-publishing zines and using halftones for art. Again, that's Cartoonist Kayfabe. That sounds awesome. I will totally listen to one of those at least because I'm busy and all this stuff, but I miss Wizard Magazine desperately, and hearing what people think of the 90s back then to now, pretty incredible as well. Like, that's a really cool idea that I'd love to see more people do, and I wish I still had my Wizard Magazines. Maybe they're still in my dad's attic. I'm not sure, but they're around somewhere. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Greg's Comic Book Club issue number 17. What did you think? Let me know on the Patreon post this post on. Also, let me know what you thought about a solo show. It's different. Wanted to try something different. Why not? We'll get a guest back, I'm sure, next week. Remember next month. Remember, your thing to do in July is read all of Paper Girls, or just issue 30 if you want to see how it closes out, because I'm desperate to know how it closes out on July 31st. Remember, patreon.com/kindafunny. All your questions, comments, concerns, your reviews, your places to go get comics. And until next time, it's been my pleasure to serve you.